Americans For Fair Taxation presents the weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans For Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 19th, 2019. Here's a famous quote from Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Now, the leaders of Congress in the swamp are hoping that Lincoln was wrong. They know that April 15th brought everyone's attention to just how bad their baby, the present income payroll tax system, really is. They want to fool all of the people all of the time. Now, in advance of April 15th, they hurriedly passed legislation that they're now trying to spin by telling us, we know that it's had its many faults, but we've fixed them all, so now it's okay to have the income payroll tax system. Just trust us. With great fanfare, they released a statement. H.R. 1957, the Taxpayer First Act of 2019, bipartisan, bicameral legislation that redesigns the Internal Revenue Service for the first time in more than 20 years to better serve taxpayers. Now, Oversight Subcommittee Chairman John Lewis, Democrat, Georgia, Ranking Member Mike Kelly, Republican, Pennsylvania, Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal, Democrat, Massachusetts, and Ranking Member Kevin Brady, Republican, Texas, and the bipartisan members of the Oversight Subcommittee are the ones who introduced this measure. Now, the bill purports to do the following. Establish the IRS Independent Office of Appeals to resolve federal tax controversies without litigation. Require the IRS to develop a comprehensive customer service strategy. Continue the IRS Free File program, but at the same time preventing the IRS from providing a filing service to compete with TurboTax and H&R Block. It purports to modify tax enforcement procedures that address such issues as the seizure of property, issuing a summons, joint liability, referral for private debt collection, and contacting third parties. It also seeks to modify procedures for whistleblowers, establish requirements for cybersecurity and identity protection, and prohibit the rehiring of certain IRS employees who were removed for misconduct. Gotta admit, I'm still shaking my head on that last one. So what is this bill really acknowledging? Again, it's clearly telling everyone, we know that it's had its many faults, but we've fixed them, so it's okay now to have the income payroll tax system. Just trust us. The swamp and their allies in Congress know that if they control what is passed to the people by their controlled media, that the advice of Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda expert, may allow them to continue their lucrative con job a while longer. Goebbels said, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, the people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained, though, only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. End of quote. The swamp will work with their friends in the media to convince the people that this Band-Aid that they're boasting about transformed a failed system into a good system. Now, what this Taxpayer First Act does not address is the evasion problem. Everyone knows, including Congress and the swamp, that the income payroll tax system is losing more and more money to illegal tax evasion. Even this statement from Dr. Sebula's study is beginning to sound a bit too conservative. Quoting from that study, our estimated gross tax gap for the period 2017 through 2026 lies within the range of $6.24 trillion. Now that's based on a growth rate that matches the average inflation rate, to $9.17 trillion. That's based on the historical growth rate of the gross tax gap. If we look at the average of the historical growth of the tax gap, $9.7 trillion over 10 years, and then look at the CBO's projected deficit of between $900 billion and $1 trillion for the next decade, we see that most of the projected deficit would be eliminated if we just simply reduce evasion. As more people learn the truth about the income payroll tax system, more will demand that April 15 not be such a dreaded day, but simply a day marking the middle of April. Now let's take a quick look at how much tax pros are earning. One of the groups that's not excited about the idea of replacing the failed income payroll tax system with a fair tax is the group that make their money working with income tax preparation and income tax planning. In an Accounting Today article, Michael Cohn quoted a study by the consulting firm Korn Ferry that showed this data about tax professionals' annual salaries. A tax analyst, that's someone with 1 to 2 years experience, pulls down $60,000 a year. Intermediate tax accountants, 2 to 4 years experience, $66,960, and senior tax accountants, those with 6 or more years experience, pull down an average $99,625 salary. Korn Ferry senior client partner Tom McMullen said, "Being a tax professional is a big job as their clients entrust them to understand all the aspects of the tax code and to give the best advice on financial matters beyond simply filling out tax returns. Our analysis shows that as they gain more experience, work on a variety of more and more complex tax matters, as well as advising and influencing their customers, they are rewarded accordingly." These tax pros are certainly not in favor of any system that eliminates their niche, even though they, more than others, know how absurd and incomprehensible the present income payroll tax system really is. Let's look at some IRS jokes. No April 15th is complete without looking at some of the jokes about our present income tax system. Here goes. How can you tell when a tax auditor is trying to trap you into a confession? Well, when his lips are moving. A little boy wanted $100 really bad, so he decided to write to President Clinton and ask for it. The president was so impressed, touched, and amused that he instructed his secretary to send the little boy a $5 bill. The little boy was delighted with the $5 and sat down to write a thank you note. It said, "Dear Mr. President, thank you very much for sending me the money I asked for. However, I noticed that you had to send it through Washington, D.C., and as usual, those jerks deducted $95 from it." 2 junior doctors were involved in a fight at the hospital. A senior consultant had to pull them apart. "What's this all about?" asked the consultant angrily. "It's the tax inspector in C Ward," said one of the doctors. "He's only got 2 days to live." "Well, he has to be told," said the second doctor. "I know," says the first, "but I want to be the one to tell him." How many God-fearing, tax-paying, law-abiding IRS employees who respect the rights of taxpayers does it take to light a bonfire? Both of them. How do tax accountants make a bold fashion statement? They wear their dark gray socks instead of the light gray ones. And the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion? Jail. How do you know you have a great CPA? He has a tax loophole named for him. A tax advisor had just read the story of Cinderella to his 4-year-old daughter for the first time. The little girl was fascinated by the story, especially the part where the pumpkin turns into a golden coach. Suddenly she piped up, "Daddy, when the pumpkin turned into a golden coach, would that be classified as income or a long-term capital gain?" Now let's look at some quotes about the system. "We'll try to cooperate fully with the IRS because, as citizens, we feel a strong patriotic duty to stay out of jail." That's from Dave Barry. "The only 2 things that scare me are God and the IRS." Dr. Dre. Evel Knievel said, "The Internal Revenue Service is more ruthless than the Gestapo. Abolish the IRS. Stamp out organized crime." "I'm proud to be paying taxes in the United States. The only thing is, I could be just as proud for half the money," so said Arthur Godfrey. People who complain about taxes can be divided into 2 classes, men and women. Not sure where that one came from. A tax loophole is something that benefits the other guy. If it benefits you, that's tax reform. Russell B. Long, U.S. Senator. The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax. Albert Einstein said that. Where there's an income tax, the just man will pay more and the unjust less on the same amount of income. That was Plato. The income tax has made more liars out of the American people than golf, so said Will Rogers. And finally, The art of taxation consists in so plucking the goose as to obtain the largest possible amount of feathers with the smallest possible amount of hissing. Jean-Baptiste Colbert. In conclusion, I recall reading a statement by a member of the Navajo tribe who said, "If you want to know what a government official saying, 'Trust us,' means, well, we trusted them, and just look at what the government did to my people." The swamp and its allies in Congress continue to shout and yell that they have made the income tax much better. That's like saying that people who are starving to death and don't have enough to eat are not overweight. It's true that the reforms promised are better than what we had, but they're still not enough to save a failed system that is still hurting all of us. They just simply say, "Trust us." Back to Abraham Lincoln now. He asked a group, "How many legs does a dog have if you call his tail a leg?" A member of the group answered, 5. Lincoln shook his head and says, "Nope, still just 4. Saying that a tail is a leg doesn't make it one." So saying this new legislation will magically make the income payroll tax system into something wonderful doesn't make it so. It's still the same failed system with just a new coat of paint on it. Like the Navajo member said, we know what "trust us" really means.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org or bigsolution.org.